What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today I'm here to lay out my top 10 movies of 2017. And you know, something interesting about 2017 is that I've said multiple times that it kind of felt like a down year, at least in comparison to 2016, which was pretty amazing in my opinion. A lot of people kind of disagree with me on 2016, thought it kind of sucked for film. I thought it was great. A lot of great movies across a number of different genres, and you know, some of my favorite movies of all time. But when I made this list for 2017, I was like, you know what? It wasn't so bad actually. Not as good as 2016, but still pretty good. Because the hard part, as always, is narrowing down the list to 10, because there are a lot of great films that probably deserve to be on the list, but just barely missed the cut for me. And you're gonna see at the end of this video that I have a ton of honorable mentions. So what that tells me is that 2017 was a better year for film than I thought it was, because there were a lot of really great films that were in consideration for my top 10. So maybe not quite as many that'll be on my top 10 of all time list or, anywhere close to that, but still a lot of really good films. Either way, let's kick things off with my number 10 film of 2017, Lady Bird. Lady Bird, being the last review that I did, is still pretty fresh in my mind, I'd say. But I fully expect this one to stick with me for a while. This story resonated with me because it felt real. I felt immersed and invested in the story because it felt so genuine. There's certainly some elements that are fairly specific to Lady Bird herself, but there are a lot of general concepts or themes that will resonate with a lot of different audiences, a lot of different people. Like any coming-of-age story, it's partly designed to bring back those feelings you had when you were growing up, and it hooks you that way and gets you heavily invested. So yeah, the story's great, but it helps that this is one of the best acted films of the year. Saoirse Ronan, whose name I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing correctly, not 100% sure, and Laurie Metcalf end up leading the way and delivering two Oscar-worthy performances. I'd be absolutely shocked if these two weren't at least nominated. I loved pretty much everything they did on screen because the relationship felt dysfunctional, yet loving and genuine at the same time. It took the mundane elements of family drama and growing up and made it riveting somehow. And that's in large part due to these two great performances. This isn't a knock your socks off, hilarious type of film, but it's funny enough, to provide comic relief to the heavier parts of the story. This is just a very nicely written film all around, and Lady Bird, is super well deserving of a spot in the top 10 this year. I suspect it will be much higher for many others, including the Academy, so if you watch other top 10 videos or lists or read a bunch of different things, I suspect Lady Bird will at least be in the top 10 for almost everybody, but at least the vast majority of people. My number 9 movie of 2017 is Christopher Nolan's newest film, Dunkirk. Now, Dunkirk was definitely one of the more highly anticipated films of the year, for a lot of people, including myself. Anytime you have Christopher Nolan directing a film or helming a film, even producing a film, it's gonna have a lot of hype surrounding it. Luckily, Dunkirk lives up to the hype, exceeds it in a lot of ways, despite the fact that the characters are pretty underdeveloped by design, and that wasn't something I loved. But overall, I really did love this film as a whole because it's a pedal to the metal, suspenseful war film. It has brutal imagery, and it goes perfectly with the fast-paced storytelling and all its non-linear glory. Dunkirk also looks and sounds amazing. Let's just, say that early. Nolan directs films with usually excellent visuals, and he tends to have Hans Zimmer score his films, which always leads to an amazing combination. I was especially impressed with the aerial shots in Dunkirk and how fast-paced the movie felt through the music and the sound effects, like the ticking clock, like you saw in the trailer. Technically, Dunkirk excels in all the ways you'd expect it to. And these elements combined with the fast-paced story like I mentioned, and fantastic acting from an awesome ensemble cast, one of the best he's ever assembled, allow it to overcome the lack of character development. Dunkirk was great, and it was another one I expect to see on a lot of people's favorites of 2017. It's definitely one of Nolan's best films. I don't think I'd say it's my favorite, but it's certainly one of the best war films to come out in a while. It's right there with Hacksaw Ridge. Alright, so my number 8 film of 2017 is The Disaster Artist. I had high hopes for The Disaster Artist, but it wasn't because of the trailers. That had me honestly pretty worried. I had high hopes because I've seen The Room multiple times like many people out there, and I really love it. And I've also read the Disaster Artist book, which is obviously what this movie is based on, and the book contains so many pieces to the story of Greg and Tommy's friendship and relationship, and of course making The Room itself, which is, the primary focus of the book. And that made me much more invested in The Room as a film. So when the Disaster Artist trailer dropped, I was, kind of worried because I just wasn't quite sure James Franco was the right person to portray Tommy Wiseau. I didn't love the accent and the portrayal he was doing, and it just didn't feel right judging from that trailer. But luckily, those trailers were not indicative of, what was to come. Because James Franco may have not nailed the accent 100% spot on all of the time, but he pretty much nailed Tommy's personality and mannerisms dead on, which is most important. James Franco delivered one of the best performances of the year as Tommy, but I think the friendship between Greg and Tommy was honestly what hooked me the most. At the core of this film, that's what this story is. It's a true story about dreamers and an extremely unlikely friendship and success story, and seeing the ups and downs of this odd friendship was what hooked me emotionally. I think that's kind of what they were going for. I don't think Dave Franco was the perfect Greg, but he certainly wasn't a bad Greg. He's good in this movie. And similarly to James Franco, I tried to view the work as a performance and, not an impersonation. And that helped me enjoy the film a lot more, because this isn't a remake of The Room. I don't think anyone really wanted it to be. It's about the key people behind it and, how the movie came to be. It's still a very hilarious movie because it plays to the oddness of Tommy and, of course, how bad The Room is. But The Disaster Artist isn't a so bad it's good type of film. It's just a really good film that tells a unique and odd success story for two unlikely friends. And that's kind of, what I love the book for and what I love the movie for. It doesn't just ride the cult following of The Room. It adds to the lore of The Room, so to speak. I was worried about it going in, but I am happy to say The Disaster Artist was great. And is, definitely one of the best films of 2017. Definitely another movie I expect to see on a lot of top 10 lists. Moving along to my number 7 film of 2017, Gifted. Now, Gifted is not a film I expect to see on many critics' best of the year list. And that surprises me, because I think it easily was one of the best films of the year, at least in my opinion. It still managed to pretty much captivate me for nearly 100 minutes. The biggest criticism I have of the film is that the first act tends to play it a little too safe, a little too family friendly. But everything after that had me extremely emotionally invested in this, unique family drama story. It's unique because the main conflict revolves about how this rarely and exceptionally gifted child should be raised, how she should be shaped by her surroundings, either in a modest setting with Chris Evans' character, Frank, where she would lead a normal life, or a lavish one with her grandmother that would, potentially allow her to, hone her unique intellectual gifts to grow more naturally. Gifted dives headfirst into a lot of interesting themes about parenting and family and commitment, and it resonated with me a lot more deeply than similar films of the past have. I felt way more invested in Mary's story than I expected to. I didn't, I was excited to see this movie, but I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. And probably the biggest reason I loved it, honestly, is McKenna Grace. I said in my original review and I still stand by this, that she is a star in the making. But it's really nice to see Chris Evans specifically step into a more dramatic role. I thought he was great in this movie, and I honestly can't wait to see where he goes, once he's done with Captain America and he hangs up the Captain America shield. In a lot of ways, Frank is the main character in Gifted. And I like Chris Evans' performance because he plays a character that has his flaws and imperfections and insecurities, and that positions the audience to, feel conflicted, as if the solution isn't quite so simple, because it's not. Gifted is a great film, and it's being, incredibly underrated right now and underappreciated right now. If you have a chance, I really do highly recommend you go watch this one. It's really well worth your time. Whether you love coming of age or family drama films, whatever, this is a film that a lot of different people can enjoy, and it's one of the more underrated films I've seen in a while. Moving on to my number 6 film of 2017, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, Guardians 2 had massive expectations because of the successes of Guardians 1. Unexpected successes in a lot of ways, because a lot of people thought Guardians 1 would suck, me included. And Guardians 2 has been received a bunch of different ways, all across the spectrum. Some loved it, some liked it, some hated it. Well, I personally loved it. Aside from tendency to sort of overdo it, because, a lot of sequels fall into that trap, with the jokes try to be too funny too often. I thought Guardians 2 was great because in a lot of ways it subverted my expectations. I think we always expect a sequel to go bigger and bolder, but Guardians 2 goes smaller. It elects to focus on the characters and spends most of its time allowing us to better understand them. And you still have that silly Guardians tone that rings through most of the film, just like the first one, that allows things to be just as funny as the first time around, yet still touching and more emotional than the first film was. And I thought this Guardians was still hilarious, and that's something that we all wanted. But I liked how the relationships between the team developed more over the course of the second film than they did over the first one. I liked how they filled in the backstories and took the characters in, I guess I'd say, unexpected directions, and ultimately made this story about family. That is the core. When you cut to the core of this film, this story is about family, blood or not, and how all of them found a dysfunctional and unexpected family in each other. And it cut way deeper than expected in that way. But it's not like it still isn't a Marvel movie, you know what I mean? It's got plenty of awesome action, particularly in the climax, which is one of the best, and the visuals as a whole were just incredibly vibrant and fun. Guardians 2 was a great follow-up for me, and it's one of my favorite Marvel films, somewhere in the top 5 to 7 or so. It's definitely Marvel's best film of 2017, which a lot of people are going to disagree with me on because of Ragnarok, but for me it's the best of 2017 and it easily belongs in the top 10. Alright, so on to number 5, It Comes at Night. And this is probably going to be the most controversial one on the list, because It Comes at Night seems to be maybe the most polarizing film of the year. Maybe the most polarizing film I've seen in several years. And I totally get why. It was marketed as a balls-to-the-wall supernatural horror flick. And it's not really either of those things. It's not even really a horror movie when you think about it. It's more so a thriller than anything else. Now for me, I was okay with that. I felt misled, obviously, but the direction they decided to go was so gripping and so tense pretty much throughout that I forgave them for misleading me, into that theater with their trailers and marketing. There's a lot going on within the walls and around this cabin in the woods. The film manages to take a extremely isolated story and make it feel extremely tense and dangerous. If I could describe It Comes at Night in one word, it would be tense, which is what you're looking for out of a thriller. This movie did tension better than any movie I saw in 2017. Now, they don't really answer very many of your questions, and a lot of people are going to have a ton of questions and they're going to hate that. And I didn't love that either. But it does it in a way that, aids the uncertainty of the movie. The sound, the score, and the cinematography are all top-notch, and they make the entire experience feel claustrophobic. There's a lot of very dimly lit shots and long zooms down hallways, very creepy style, and creaking sounds in the floorboards. And just really unsettling music. And this all just makes you feel uneasy and tense, like the characters feel when they're all hiding out together in this house in the woods. And just as a whole, there's a lot of interesting commentary here about human nature, about how humans react when they feel uncomfortable and when they feel threatened. And I like that a lot. When you strip away all the excess and just get humans into survival mode, we change dramatically. That's exactly what this film does and what it tries to show. And as a whole, I very much enjoyed It Comes at Night. It sort of tricked me and it tricked a lot of people, and it's not what we all expected, but nonetheless, it was great. And, I'm happy with it in the top 10. Next up, my number 4 film of 2017, Murder on the Orient Express. Now maybe I spoke too soon, because Murder on the Orient Express may be my most controversial one on this list, because it wasn't really a film that was received particularly well by a lot of the critics or the fans for that matter. But I'm honestly pretty baffled by this as well. I found it to be a very engaging, old school style mystery film that's very different from almost any other film I've seen this year. You don't see a lot of these mystery, whodunit, find the murderer kind of films anymore. And I like the willingness to reboot a very old story, and I liked how well crafted this story as a whole was. I was very engaged with this mystery, and I liked how Kenneth Branagh played to the story's strengths, and that's the characters. The characters are all extremely unique individuals with a lot of personality. They have a very particular reason for being on the train. It helps that the cast is, absolutely loaded from top to bottom with stellar talent, literally from top to bottom. And I think a big reason this mystery story works as well as it does is because of the characters and the cast and how great the performances are. And the conversations are where pretty much everything happens. The conversations take up most of the screen time between the great characters and actors, and they help move the movie along. I liked how dynamic the dialogue and acting were. And Murder on the Orient Express gave me, honestly, as a whole, a lot more than I bargained for. Because it can be funny, it can be mysterious, it can be sad, and it can be thrilling at the same time. It's an old-fashioned story with old-fashioned storytelling, that's obvious. And it's based mostly on conversations and dialogue and atmosphere. And yeah, I'm pretty shocked that so many people disliked it. I'm not sure why this is, honestly. I'd probably have to read up more on that. To me, this is one of the best of the year and definitely worth a watch for almost anybody. Adults mostly, but yeah. Alright, so next up is my number 3 movie of 2017, Coco. Now, Coco is a Pixar film. And with the Pixar name comes big expectations. They've created a number of great films now, and Coco is expected to at least be very good. But many were hoping for greatness, and luckily we got it. This may just be the most emotional that I got during a film this year, because Coco knows how to hit you square in the feels. It's basically target practice for them. Because this is a beautiful story about family and identity and culture and tradition, and it touches on a number of different topics and themes, and it does so meaningfully. And in a way that made me feel a ton of different emotions, usually simultaneously, which is kind of rare for an animated film. But it's always tricky though, because it tackles a lot of different important and meaningful topics, and it tries to be funny at the same time. And they somehow pull it off. Pixar has a unique way of being clever and funny, and appealing to a wide range of audiences. A lot of kid films could tend to be overly slapstick or overly goofy to appeal to that primary demographic of kids. But Coco has something for everyone. And basically everyone can find enjoyment in this film, either emotionally, through the comedy or humor, whatever the case may be. The story is great as well. Pretty much everyone can enjoy this film. And adults won't feel excluded with Coco like they do with most kids' films. And it also helps that Coco looks, just like every Pixar film, looks and sounds fantastic. The animation is getting, it's progressing so fast, it's getting ridiculously good. The Land of the Dead was, oddly enough, so full of life and so vibrant, and the facial expressions and all the items, they look so colorful and amazing, and the animation is just so awesome. And the music, another big part of the story, is also very great. All around, Coco is just a hit. It's another hit for Pixar, and it's a shoo-in to me for Best Animated Film of the Year at the Oscars, coming in February. It's one of the best movies of the year, period, and it's definitely a must-see whether you enjoy animated films or not. I think everyone can enjoy it. Alright, so we're down to the final two. My number 2 film of 2017 is John Wick Chapter 2. I love the first John Wick. It's one of my favorite action films ever, and as you'd expect, I was excited for the second installment, just to see where they would take the character and what crazy scenarios they could come up with next. And they came up with some crazy ones, and expanded on the John Wick lore quite a bit, expanded the universe. And I'm kind of torn as whether I like this one or the original better. And as of now, I like 2 better. I think the first movie had more emotion and drama, and the second has more excitement. The long, continuous take shootouts are some of the best action scenes ever put to film, in my opinion. And just insane, it's just a wild ride from start to finish. And I love the acting from everyone. But I gotta say that Keanu Reeves is the absolute perfect fit for John Wick. He has that ruggedness and darkness that the character needs. And he makes John Wick all the more compelling as a protagonist, if you could call him a protagonist, because of it. He also nails the action stuff too. And I'm pretty sure that the choreography and the preparation, I'm sure it's excellent with how well the movie, always plays out. But Keanu Reeves really embodies this character very well, and he pulls off the action very well. And technically, John Wick 2 is just as amazing as the first one. The sound, the gunshots, and the cars, and the music and the editing, all the technical elements of this film really feel frantic and exciting. And that's a large part of why so many people love it. It's bloody and it's chaotic, but it's just unique and exciting at the same time. And that's what makes John Wick John Wick. It's one of the best of the year, and I honestly hope it gets the recognition it deserves from, the award ceremonies or whoever else is doing their list. Because a lot of people are forgetting about this film and how great it was. And you shouldn't forget about John Wick 2, because it's one of the best action films ever, in my opinion. Alright, so my number 1 film of 2017 is It. I was pretty excited for It. I'm actually a fan of the miniseries in the 90s because it still scared the hell out of me as a kid, even though it can get, kind of silly at times. But this version of Pennywise and this version of It is different than what we've seen before. A big reason this film brought this story back into the spotlight so successfully was because it's a horror movie, but it's much more than that. It provides comic relief, it develops each of the characters in a satisfying fashion, and it provides compelling drama outside of just the scary stuff. Part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of, modern horror films, I've said that before in a bunch of different videos, is because they're often very predictable and very shallow, and the characters often just suck, in my opinion. But that's not the case at all with It. And it has written characters that are much better than what you get out of most horror films, characters that you actually have an investment in. I think these young actors brought so much life to this film. And without them being so great, It would definitely suffer and, might fall into more generic horror territory. But this isn't to say that the kids carry this film alone. They're great, but so is Bill Skarsgård, who I think gave one of the best performances of the year, period, as Pennywise. I was actually nervous coming into the film, because I love Tim Curry and what he did with the character, and Bill Skarsgård's version just felt so different. I wasn't sure that I'd like his version, but I ended up loving it. He doesn't do goofy or funny things, really. He's just menacing and terrifying. And that's what this specific iteration of It and Pennywise needed. This is still a scary movie. There's a lot of visuals and music that make the film feel scary, but it's much more than just a scary movie. And that's why I think it deserves recognition for that. It is something more than a horror film, and it hits all the right beats to make it something greater. And that's why, to me, it's the number 1 movie of 2017. Alright, so thanks for sticking with me through that entire list. Before we wrap up though, here's some honorable mentions that were also really good. Like I said, the top 10 was a little bit tough to narrow down, and these films didn't quite make the list, but were still really good. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of honorable mentions. So let's start with Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Get Out, Logan, Logan Lucky, Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Only the Brave, Wind River, The Big Sick, and Wonder Woman. So now that you've seen my top 10 of the year, make sure to let me know your top 10 in the comments below. I'm sure it will differ because we all have different tastes, and that's, honestly what makes the conversation fun. Either way, that's all for now though. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next video.